think strategic. So if you're trying to get into business, yeah, okay, there's a business opportunity, but act tactically. I think a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, they have a really good idea and they, I want to do this and that. I say, okay, what are you going to do about it? I think that seriously, I mean, everyone says, 1% inspiration, 99 perspiration. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. It's like, you've got that idea, but what have you done? Have you talked to people? Have you talked to people in space? Have you sort of started making connections? People are actually really nice. People are good. You reach out to 10 people on LinkedIn, you're going to get 3 or 4 people ping you back and say, hey, I know you work for whoever, right? And I'm thinking about this idea. So, yeah, think strategic, but don't, act tactically. I mean, 90% of what you do something to further the idea.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I am your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's also the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And today I've got another exciting guest on here that has a fun journey. The name is Ankesh, and I've tried to do my best to pronounce her name, make sure I do it right. But Ankesh, he has done a few different startups, taken a couple different companies from 0 to 8 figures, I think it was. And he's raised money with venture funding and sold patents to Google. He was born in India, grew up in London. So he has all sorts of a great journey to share. So welcome onto the podcast.
Thank you, Darren. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So I gave an intro to yourself, but I think you will always give a better intro to yourself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that leads up to where you're at today?
Sure. Yeah, I was actually born in New Delhi in India. My father actually worked for Air India. So when I was 3, he actually got posted to London. So I'm talking late 60s here. So at the age of 3, moved to London. And we lived close to Heathrow Airport. And I did all my early education in and around London. I did funnily enough, my first undergraduate degree was in hotel and catering management, which was nothing related with anything I ended up doing, but it was a lot of fun and a lot of good experiences. Then I did an MBA, and then I did a postgraduate an MBA in management studies. That was in Brighton University. And so I worked in London, for a few years, and like 89, I said, what, I need to get out of it. I need to change the scenery. So I just landed in San Jose. I did have a cousin here, so I was staying with her. I was gainfully unemployed. There was in the US and in England, there was a little bit of a recession going on. And I just sort of, I didn't want to go home. So I just sort of like picked up the phone. That was my first, my first adventure of my first venture was just picking up the phone in those days without cell phones, with roller quarters, just dialing for a job. I got a job in San Jose, $800 a month recoverable draw. What that meant is if I made money, they deducted all the money they prepaid me. But I was 27, I was young, I was enjoying it, going to the $2 buffets at the Red Lion, and ended up starting my own staffing company. And that was the time there was a lot of people coming in on B1 visas and for the technical. So my company, AT Systems, we started off, and I basically didn't touch any investment. What I did was I would actually have vendors to supply me the resources. I would actually have the contracts with the customers, and then I would be paid in 30 days. In those days, my customers were like Electronic Arts, Sun Microsystems, Wells Fargo. So they were really pretty good customers. They paid on time, and I paid my vendor.
Maybe dive into that just a little bit, because I think that's interesting, because a lot of times, and I certainly think there are different ways to fund or to get a startup going, and sometimes you can bootstrap it, right? So you're saying, hey, I can self-fund it, or I can bootstrap it, or it's not a capital investment. Other times you're saying, hey, this is to really do anything, we're going to have $20 million or whatever. Most people can't bootstrap that, so you have to go and get investment. And so how did you, doing the different companies, how did you make the difference or decision between, let's get outside investors, put fuel on the fire, versus let's do this ourselves, versus let's self-fund? Or how did you kind of make that determination?
So for that venture, I was already working for that staffing company, so I understood the market. I couldn't go back to the same customers that my previous employer was working for. So the tough bit was actually starting for the new ones. But I had a lot of confidence in myself, because I actually, for that company, they were a small mom and pop shop. They were doing about $2 million in revenue, and I'd sort of double the revenue to 4 million. And, they promised me, and I was very happy working for them. And I wasn't sort of like thinking about going to do a startup. So I bought in 2 million of revenue for them. And, I was getting 10% of the margin because I was getting a base salary. And clearly you crunch the numbers. If you're getting 100% of the margin, you need to do 1/10 the work. So, it wasn't a difficult decision. I got married by then. So my wife was actually working. She wasn't earning a lot of money. She was doing a residency. So she was getting around those days about 30,000 a year. But, we had low cost of living, and, again, you don't really think about that stuff. So we had enough to put food on the table and pay the rent, but that was about it. So it took me about 3 to 6 months to start generating some business. And I had built up the relationships with the sub vendors previously. So, and it's just, so the model just worked, and we worked from day one. So that was really cool.
So if you were to do it, so because it sounded like, and certainly if I put words in your mouth, correct me, you're saying, hey, I could either continue. It wasn't necessarily intended to do a startup, but you got to the point saying, hey, I'm making good money, but I only make a 10% of the margins. I can do this on my own. Why wouldn't I go and get 100% of the margins as opposed to 10%? Is that kind of the tripping point, or how did you make that decision?
Yeah, well, actually, the tripping point, because I was never, and this sounds corny or stupid, but whatever, I was never motivated by money. I really, and this is getting a little philosophical, I really believe in quality of life and having good relationships with people and enjoying the people you're with. That's a lot more important than a singular focus on money. So, it is important, clearly, but, it wasn't my driver. The decision-making, the tripping point was actually the frustration of my existing employer. And the actual event, I'll tell you exactly what happened. It was just before Christmas. It was like October, November timeframe. There was 10 people in the conference room, and they were all talking about who to send Christmas cards to. So it was salespeople, marketing people, administration. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm wasting time. I could be on the phone making business, and should be existing customers, past customers, and the type of. I'm like, no. I walked out and I said, okay. There've been previous incidences like that, but it was just my frustration of not being able to do things the way I thought they could be done. Just being held back. So that's really what it was. Clearly, the numbers worked, right? But that was I just felt having control over my own destiny was the driver.
Okay, no, I think that makes sense. You're saying. I mean, I agree. Numbers always, numbers have to work, and some, you don't want to just go jump out on your own if it doesn't make sense. But then beyond that, you're saying, hey, and I think that's where a lot of people get, it's either, hey, I think I can do this better, or I just not even necessarily better. I just want to do it my own way, or I think I can do it a different way that's more enjoyable. I can have control, lifestyle, whatever that is. But I think that's a good point that, that can be a good motivator. It doesn't always have to be just the financial or to make the money, but maybe it's just like to do it your own way or be in control or whatever. So you did that. So you jumped out and you did that. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to put emphasis on that, I think if you talk to any entrepreneur, any startup person, anyone running their own business, they don't be an entrepreneur, they'll tell you that's the number one thing they enjoy about having a business, having the freedom, the flexibility, probably work as hard, if not harder, evenings, weekends, but that's the number one driver. But anyway, going back to the story then, I'd met a guy working for that company, and he had this idea of a software product. It was all about recruiting, so the ability of resumes coming in. And he wanted me to work with him on that project. So I started with working on that. That was called Personic. My staffing company was AT Systems, so that started a year later. So we did $1 million in the first year on the staffing company, and then we started on the software company. And just to kind of cut quickly, and you can ask me questions. We did like 1, 5, 15, 20 million on the staffing company. And then a year later, we did $1 million in Personic, which is the software company, and then 8, 16, 24. We did raise money for the software company. We had Battery Ventures, TCV, AIG, and a few others over a period of time. And in total, in aggregate, we raised about 50 million for the second venture. And at one point, the investors were like, you can't be CEO of 2 companies. So I had to sell the staffing company, which actually worked out to be a really good thing. So we sold it to TMP, the parent company of Monster. And we were able to put a little money in, in the back pocket and then focus on the software company.
Diving into that just a little, because I'm on the opposite. I have multiple interests, and I end up, I end up being running or otherwise be involved with a couple different companies. As I mentioned, I do Miller IP Law, where we help, patents and trademarks for startups, small businesses, but I also have been engaged in a couple of my own startups. So do you think that you should and you can completely contradict what I do, and that's certainly fine. Do you think you need to have that singular focus, and you only look at one thing, and you only focus on one thing? Or sometimes if you have two great ideas or two great companies, can you be involved with both? Or kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm actually working on two ventures right now. And I kind of, and like my development team, you'd think that developers would push back and say, "Oh no, man, I can't," So we literally, we're talking about slide at 1 minute, next time we're talking about sharetivity, and I go out a question on slides. We're going back and forth. I find it, enthralling. I find it exciting. It just really gets my blood pumped. I don't know if more than two, because we were actually thinking about doing something else, but we put that on the back burner. No, I think it's good. I mean, I always tell people it's like my plan A, plan B. And look, I've had my share of failures, but you have to fail quickly. You have to, really realize, is this, you're just thinking this yourself, or, you're getting validation from customers. So the ability to have a lot of ideas. I mean, take investors, VCs, right? They've got 7. I mean, they're not in the weeds, right? They're not actually doing, but they're actually keeping multitasking. They know what's going on, and if they're good investors, they know about hiring, they know about revenue. They're looking at numbers and stuff. So if they can do 6 or 7 ventures simultaneously, there's no reason you can't do 2.
Okay, no, and I just thought that was an interesting point, because you hear, wisdom or whatever you want to call it, and both sides, and some people say, hey, you have to be laser focused, get one thing going, and other people saying, hey, but I got multiple interests and I got some good ideas. Why can't I pursue these? And I think that where it is you have to gauge what your ability is, or if you can multitask, if you can be able to jump between projects, then you may be that cut out. And if you're saying, hey, I can only really, if I'm going to do something, I have to be all in. So I think there's both sides. So jumping back now to your journey. So you did both staffing companies, you grew the second one, got it up to big. And I think that was on job or tracking of job application process, right?
Right. So we were actually filed the S1 to go public with that company, and 2000 the market crash. So everything dried up, funding and everything else. So we were doing, as I was saying, around 24 million a year, about 2 million a month. But we were burning $1 million a month. At that time, our bankers, Robertson Stevenson, were like, "Hey, prior to the crash, doesn't matter about you burning money. They just want to see top line growth." But clearly, after the crash, we missed the window. We ended up selling the company. So I sort of, it went through a 6-month period finding a buyer and stuff. And that wasn't my thing. I mean, I'm a startup guy, so I left around that time. And I just had a 2-year-old daughter, and I was like, okay, let's spend some time with the family and stuff. So post that, I was doing some investments, personal investments, investing in venture funds, and for a few years, and then I started doing a couple of other ventures. I did one in actually, it was an interesting one. It was employee time off. For anyone who's in the financial world, they'll know that when you give employees vacation, that sits as a liability on the balance sheet, known as vacation accrual liability. And if people are taking time off and not reporting it, you build up your vacation accrual liability. And actually, I got a meeting with Leapfrog, the kids entertainment educational company, and sitting in the meeting with the CFO and the controller. And I'd set up the meeting, and I said, out of curiosity, what's your vacation accrual liability? He turned to his controller, and she moved some papers around and said, 2.3 million. So that was the easiest sell that I problem with that venture was that the sales cycle was long, because IT got involved, finance got involved, HR got involved, and the ball kept moving who you're talking to. The sales cycles are so long, but we had some good customers. Siebel, who got bought by Oracle, were using it. Business Objects worldwide were using it, so we had it in different countries. So it was a pretty good venture. We didn't raise any money. We made a little money because we were sort of cash flow positive, but we ended up just sort of just winding it down a little bit. And then I did another one, which is a little plug for IP. I actually had an idea about, and this is prior to, everyone's familiar with the Facebook like button, right? I mean, they launched that around 10 years ago. About 11 years ago, we realized that sharing of content is a page ranking mechanism. I mean, everyone realizes that, Google, likes employing page ranking, looking at different signals, as they call them, but they hadn't incorporated sharing. So whether it's emailing, posting on a social media platform. And I thought to myself, wow, this is a really big idea. And I don't know if I've got the bandwidth to, build a team and take it to market. So the first thing I did was actually file a patent. So, and long story short, Google ended up buying the patent. So just a little plug for, IP, think about IP, founders is, because I did it more from a defensive standpoint, and Devin could probably, speak to this more than I can. I was never going to be offensive and go to someone and say, hey, we're going to sue you and that. But if someone started doing it, then I thought to myself, hey, by the way, we
you may want to
file
stop.
something. And
So
at least
I think that's interesting. So, because you started out, and again, if I'm putting words in your mouth, certainly correct me. But you started out and saying, I don't know if I have the bandwidth, don't know if I have the ability to take this to market. So how did you then make that approach to Google, or how did you get connected with them to sell out the intellectual property and the patents and that, and make that connection?
Well, I sort of like cut corners a bit. So I did want to grow it out. I didn't want to build it. So the first thing I actually did a provisional. I think it's called a non-provisional, right? But I forget the terminology.
Provisional is one that you get a year to decide whether or not to pursue it. Non-provisional is the full one.
Yeah. So yeah, we did a provisional, and then I try to raise money, and but you try to build a business model around that, right? I mean, so you've got this IP, but then you're thinking, okay, what is the business model? And that's what we couldn't figure out. So I was talking to my patent attorney at the time, and then a funny story, he ended up working for Google. So what happened when Google purchased the patents, he said, hey, can I take the box? Because we're pretty close in Mountain View. I live in Palo Alto. So he actually physically took all the documents and built up a rapport. And because he was an independent guy. And so it was good for him. So he said to me, by the way, Ankesh, your IP is worth something? And I'm like, really? I said, what, 10,000, 20,000, whatever. So he put me in touch with a patent broker. And they actually ran the numbers. They actually got some software that sort of like looks at the value of it. And they give me a different deal, 10% if they pay them up front, or 20% if they do nothing. I said, you know what? Give you 20%, I won't pay any money. And so they approached Facebook. I forget who else, but maybe Microsoft. But Facebook and Google were the two guys, the main guys. Because the like button had come out by then.
No, that's interesting. So basically, to a large extent, you did that. Your patent attorney connected you up with a broker. Broker found the deal, and for not having to do not having to build the whole company, you were able to sell off to Google and get a good return on that. So
I mean, we lost money on the venture, but I mean, I don't know. At least I can say I sold patents to Google, right? I mean, it gives you some level of credibility in the market. And then, so since then, as I said, I've just been doing some investments, and now I've actually in the last year, because my elder daughter actually just graduated from NYU, so she's been gone 4 years. My younger one just started. She's a freshman, or just rising freshman now at UC Davis. So in the last, because as I said, to me, family is really important. I want to spend time, and so I was doing some ventures like the ones I was describing. But in the recent couple of years, I've been working on two new ventures. One is Sharetivity, which is a B2B. It's basically helping salespeople with personalization of outreach. And we all get these emails, hey, checking in, are you interested in talking? Can we set up a meeting? We're saying, you know what, you got to make that a little bit more personal. Talk about some interest they've got. I mean, I'm a Liverpool fan. If someone says, hey, Liverpool going to win the championship this year, and so, I mean, I'd open the email and I'd say, you know what, I want to talk to this guy. He took the effort to do it. And so that's more a social thing. But if there's a business thing, if there's just since we're talking about patents, if they've actually wrote a LinkedIn article about IP and the value of it, the ability to sort of give some insight. The real challenge with that, which I'm really enjoying this challenge, is actually the ability to do personalization at scale. Now, what that means is if I've got 10,000 people in my prospect list, hit a button and send them 10,000 different messages. And personalize that. So I hope I'm not boring you, because I'm getting a little geeked out on this, but the thing is, you look for a topic of interest. So for someone, it could be their college. For someone else, it could be some passion they've written an article about. It could be an interest like someone they're following. So identify those and then find some insight that you can add to it. And so that's kind of like what we're working on with Sharetivity.
So, and maybe just to back up so people can get an idea. So you did, and I'll walk back through the process. So you did the couple startup or the couple businesses. It was more on the job tracking. 2000, came along, and then I think one of them you talked about was job track. Another job tracking one that was AppMail. You did another company that was Social Mail that was more aggregating promotional emails into a single email. Then 2010 comes along. You decided to go and do some of your own thing. And then now you jumped over to 2 new startups, and that's kind of where we talked on about, you don't have to just do one startup. You have a couple interests that you can pursue. So you have Sharetivity, which is one that you just kind of touched on. And if I understand it, and again, I don't want to slaughter it, so you can say it much better than I can. But this one's kind of allows you to find out, personalized approaches or information about people as you're trying to reach out to them. It's I think a Google Chrome or a Chrome add-on that then you can say, hey, I want to get to know more about this person. I'm going to reach out to them. I want to make it a personal connection. And it helps you to aggregate or find that information. And then you also have, I think, Slide Buzz or Slide.buzz, right?
Yeah.
And that one, maybe give a little bit more on that one. You haven't touched on that one yet, as far as kind of what that project is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, obviously wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't passionate about it. So basically, we're all familiar with Facebook and Instagram. That's online social networking, right? So that's how you're connecting with people. And, and this is a really bad time with social distancing to do this, but we sort of like incubating it in January timeframe, January, February, was and it's going to come back. But the thing is, we all know, and actually it's probably emphasized this more, because with social distancing, we all missed a pat on the back when you're in a bar with someone having a beer and a wine and sort of, giving a little punch to the shoulder and giving a hug to someone. So Slide is about social experiences. It's about impersonal social experiences, whether it's a happy hour on a Friday, it's, going with the girls, to a spa day, going to Vegas, going on a trip to Europe. It's about managing the whole process from beginning to end. And so, we just wanted the ability, an application. No, we all do this. We do this through messaging. We use Venmo to split the costs. We store links about where to go, what to visit, wherever people do it in different ways, spreadsheets or whatever else. But that's what Slide does. So Slide, there's actually currently, and it's a mobile app, is basically wish list. So you say, what do you want to do? Where you want to go. So, it could be wine tasting, for argument's sake. And then you just, choose a couple of friends and send a link. Then they all add the, discussion within the app. And there's, there's way to split costs. There's the actual experience themselves where you can actually,
so maybe if I were to summarize it, and again, it'd be like, hey, I want to go hang gliding. I'm just making up one. Or I want to go skydiving. I want to go do mountain biking. And so you say, hey, and here's my wish list of things I want to do. Anybody else want to go do it with me? And then we can also, one, you can find people to go do it with, and two, you can also be able to split the cost or defer some of the cost. So it kind of allows you to connect with people as well as to do more of the things on your wish list and reduce the cost. Is that a fair one?
Exactly. And and it stores the banter, the communications, whether it's, trip details, all there. So it's all in one place, as opposed to in different emails and text messages, and also all the pictures and the images and everything else. And the thing we're actually working on right now is because right now, we had a really good go-to-market plan. I won't get into that unless you're curious. We thought this was going to, the feedback I got, I reached out to, just quickly tell you, 1,000 people in the event space, because they do a lot of these, party planning, event planning. We had a 26% connection rate. People actually wanted it. So it's like 260 people ready to use the app. With the coronavirus, that clearly sort of fell off a cliff. So what we got thinking was, like, even though we're not traveling, we're not doing these social experiences, I think we as human beings, the anticipation of an event, the excitement of thinking about it. So we're working on what we call inspirations. So we're actually now crawling every event around the globe. So, there's about 4,800 towns and cities around the world, over 100,000 people. So we're getting all the events. So whether it's in Bolivia or it's in Madagascar, you can actually go to slide.buzz and actually find events. And then clearly, if you want to go somewhere, then hit the wish list button and roll into the app. So it's basically front ending.
So if I dive into that, and then we're getting towards the end of the podcast, but I do have one other question before my last two questions I always ask. So you went through and you've done several different things throughout your career, everything from job searching and, helping people, job tracking and doing that type of thing, to aggregating, emails to do promotional things, sold off some things to Google, and now you're at, Sharetivity as well as Slide. And so how do you, those are all, I can see somewhat of a common thread, but they're also fairly disparate, right? In the sense that, doing Sharetivity versus, I can see that, somewhat making connections, personalization. Slide, is a bit different in the sense it's not really job tracking and job. So how did you decide, which ideas to pursue or which business to pursue or where you wanted to go?
It's about passion. If you get excited about something, right? I mean, it's just, if you really want to, if you like the idea and you feel, I mean, everything's just, it's under the bottom. The common denominator is just passion. It's hard to sort of decide. It's not based on my experiences, not experience from what we've got. It's just like, man, this is like not being done, and this is really kind of exciting, and you just get the juices flowing. So I can't really, can't say talk more than that. I mean, as you know, my background was hotel and catering management, and I did an MBA and stuff, but I don't really have any domain experience like yourself in law, and I understand the domain and I can build an application around that because I can see a broken process. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know I've actually invested in a company. I'll give him a plug, Roostify. The guy was actually a consultant, and he was talking about mortgage application process, which sucked. And he knew it sucked, and so he just said, "I'm going to rebuild that." And so he had domain experience, and it was very simple. But for me, it's like just talking to people, just seeing what's out there, and
Okay, so one would be you follow your passions, and then two, identify something that you think you can fix, improve, or make better, or otherwise it's not out in the marketplace.
I will say, sorry, just a quick one thing. When I talk to people about this, even if you don't have the domain experience, sometimes it's better not to have it because you look at things differently, that people are in this space already. So even like with this sales automation, not many people are doing this personalization. It's kind of like one of the issues we're running into because people think, well, is that really going to work? We've tried, it hasn't worked before. So people are sort of naysayers. They're more like, they follow more like sheep. So it's not a bad thing to not have domain experience.
No, and I think sometimes it's a benefit, and sometimes you get bad habits, right? Or you have even preconceived notions that, hey, it has to be this way because it's always been this way, or there are only so many ways to do this because this is how it's done. And I think sometimes, you still have to go out and understand the market. I don't think you just dive into something you have no understanding about, but to go in and learn and figure out how this is different, how you can bring a new perspective, I think is absolutely can be beneficial to different industries and domains. So as we now, and there's always so many more things I want to talk about than we ever have time to, but as we start to wrap up the podcast, I always have two questions at the end, so I'll go ahead and ask those now. So the first question is always, so what was the worst business decision you ever made?
My worst was hiring. There was one individual, in fact, we were talking about going public, and we hired a CFO, and that was the worst decision. I won't get into the details for obvious reasons, but I think that sometimes you're in a rush to hire. So I think if there's anything to be taken from that is just be really careful. I mean, people gave me advice post that. I was a young CEO then. I was also hadn't had an experience hiring people older than me. Like sit with the person in a car, drive down to Carmel, and see how time you can spend with them. So I think that that hiring is probably the wrong person at the wrong time, especially the more senior they get, because then it's harder to sort of have an exit from that. I remember that specific situation. The board were like, man, we can't make changes right now. We're going public, and so on and so forth. It was just put in a very, very difficult situation, and it did have a knock-on effect, on the company. So I think, hiring was one. I never think of bad decisions like startups. I never look back and say, oh man, I shouldn't have done that or wasted money on that. But that's something that you don't try, you don't work out.
I think probably I've done several of these podcasts, and we have lots of episodes and whatnot. And I think that is probably one of the most consistent answers that people give as far as what they have learned as the mistakes they made as hiring, in a sense. And I think that's one where it's always a much different feel when you're in the shoes, making the decisions, trying to figure out who to hire, who will be a good person for this position. And you always, people that haven't done that, you can always say, oh, you should never hire that guy. This was the flag. Mm-hmm. It's so much easier to quarterback. And yet it's one that I think a lot of times, till you're in there, you've done it, and you learn those mistakes. It's hard to sometimes know what to look for, know what the flags are, know what you shouldn't be doing. And so I think that's always a good mistake to learn from. Okay, my second question I always ask is, so somebody that's just getting into startups or wanting to get into startups, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I think what I think about every day is think strategic. So if you're trying to get into business, there's a business opportunity, but act tactically. I think a lot of people that I talk to, they have a really good idea, and I want to do this and that. I say, okay, what are you going to do about it? I think that seriously, everyone says, 1% inspiration, 99 perspiration. It's the same sort of thing. It's like, you've got that idea, but what have you done? Have you talked to people? Have you talked to people in space? Have you sort of started making connections? People are actually really nice. People are good. You reach out to 10 people on LinkedIn, you're going to get 3 or 4 people ping you back and say, hey, I know you work for whoever, right? And I'm thinking about this idea. So, yeah, think strategic, but don't, act tactically. I mean, 90% of what you do something to further the idea. So if you're currently working somewhere and, and thinking about ideas and you've got a good one, but, just put time on your calendar and work it. Don't get caught up with the vision. Don't get caught up and say, oh yeah, I've got the idea, I'm going to retire now, because that's it. That's just the beginning.
No, I think that's a great piece of advice for people to learn from. So as we wrap up, people want to get connected up with you, whether it's ask questions, they want to learn more about Sharetivity, they want to learn more about Slide, download your apps, use your Chrome extension, or otherwise just connect up. What's the best way to reach out and find out more?
I'm happy for them to just connect with me on LinkedIn. I think it's LinkedIn Ankesh Kumar. I'm pretty sure it is. They can also just email me directly. I mean, it's Ankesh, my first name, ANKESH, at Sharetivity. That's SHARETIVITY. So either email me or just connect with me on LinkedIn. Always, and I'm happy to help people as well. So if you guys got any questions, advice, I'd be happy to sort of just spend a few minutes. So, just let me know.
All right. Well, I encourage everybody to, first of all, check out Sharetivity. I think I've actually used it since we talked, and I thought it was a cool Chrome extension. So I've used it to look up a few people as well as myself, but just to see if there's anything out of the ordinary for what it's saying. But I think you got some cool ideas, cool businesses you're working with, and appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey on the podcast. So for those of you that are wanting to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to go to inventivejourney.com and apply to be a guest on the podcast. For those of you that are listeners, make sure to click subscribe so you can hear new episodes as they air. And also, for those of you that are needing help with patents and trademark, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help the startups and small businesses. So thank you again for coming on. It's been fun to hear your journey, and I look forward to seeing how the journey continues on for you, and wish you all the best of success.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Devin. Cheers.